The sound of the rain outside Chief Durosomo's luxurious Ikoyi office was a deafening roar. Inside, the silence was broken only by the crackle of the fancy electric fireplace and the heavy, fake breathing of the man slumped in the oversized leather chair. 8-year-old Dayo stood by the massive mahogany desk. He wasn't looking at the open, gleaming silver briefcase right next to the chief's hand. He wasn't looking at the neat, thick stacks of Nigerian naira notes, bundles of millions of cash that spilled out of the case like a yellow and green waterfall. No. Dayo was focused on something much more important. The old man was mad. "It is my best friend, sir," Dayo whispered, his voice trembling like a small bird in the wind. His eyes were wide and full of tears, but he didn't cry. "Grandfather said, it has the wisdom of our village inside. I need it to talk to him." He reached out his small brown hand and gently placed the object he was holding right next to the briefcase of cash. It was a carving, an old wooden Egungun mask used in traditional festivals. It was only half a face, broken off years ago, with chipped paint and a single, large, beautiful cowrie shell eye. To everyone else, it was junk. To Dayo, it was the only thing his father, Kunle, had managed to save from his own father. It was everything. "But you are wet," Dayo murmured to the sleeping chief. "And Daddy says, when you make a mistake, you must pay. This is all I have, sir. Please, take this mask and forgive my father." He stepped back, his chest tight. He had just traded his entire past, the memory of his grandfather, to save his father's job. Chief Durosomo, the richest man in Lagos, who was pretending to be asleep, felt a jolt run through his body. He lay perfectly still, his eyelids shut tight, but his mind was screaming. He had planned for greed. He had planned to see the boy's eyes widen at the sight of the millions. He had prepared his angry speech to fire the boy's father, Kunle, and confirm his own bitter belief that every person in the world was a thief. But this boy, this small, scrawny son of his new driver, had just offered a broken piece of wood, his most beloved family treasure, as payment for a debt that didn't even exist. This was not part of the plan. The millions were ignored. The sacrifice was all that mattered. The build-up. 3 days earlier, Chief Durosomo was a man who owned half of the sky in Lagos State. He owned skyscrapers in Victoria Island, luxury resorts in Dubai, and a fleet of black, bulletproof cars. But inside his mansion, which was larger than a small town, the chief was the poorest man alive. He was 72 years old, and he trusted no one. His 4 grown children only visited him on the 1st of the month, right after his bank accounts were refreshed. They called him Daddy, but only spoke about his will. His business partners smiled with white teeth, but, the chief knew, sharpened their knives in the dark. Years of betrayal had frozen his heart solid, like a block of ice from the freezer. He had just hired a new driver, a young man named Kunle. Kunle was quiet, hard-working, and always a few minutes early. The chief liked his quiet respect, but he did not trust him. Trust was a weakness. "Everyone is greedy, Kunle," the chief had grumbled just 2 days before. "Given the chance to take a little, they will always take everything." Kunle had simply looked into the rearview mirror. "Chief, sir, my father taught me that a person's name is worth more than all the gold in Obafemi." The chief had scoffed, but the words stuck with him. He decided he needed one last test, the ultimate test. He would find out if Kunle and his family were different, or if they were just like the rest of the world. He decided he would use the one thing everyone was weak for, money. He invented a special, top-secret business deal at his Ikoyi headquarters for Friday afternoon. He told Kunle to drive him there and wait. The plan was perfect. He would fake a severe medical collapse, a near-death scare right in the middle of his large, silent office. He would leave a briefcase unlocked and overflowing with cash. He would pass out right next to it. Any honest person would call for help. Any greedy person would steal the money, knowing the chief might not wake up to tell the tale. The incident set up. The test was supposed to start at 2 p.m. on Friday, but Lagos had other ideas. A massive, unexpected tropical rainstorm hit the city, turning every road into a slow brown river. Traffic became a nightmare. At 1:30 p.m., Kunle had called the mansion. His voice was full of panic. "Madam, please, I am so sorry. The school called. Dayo's school is flooded and they are closing early. I cannot leave the chief's car and I cannot leave Dayo. I have no one to watch him, please. I am stuck in the traffic jam." The chief's housekeeper, a kindly woman named Mama Kemi, told him not to worry. Bring the boy. Just keep him quiet and safe in the waiting room until the chief is done with his business. The chief is resting right now. He cannot be disturbed. Kunle arrived, soaking wet, his heart pounding not from the rain, but from fear. He knew Chief Durosomo hated children and noise. To bring his son, Dayo, into the headquarters was a risk that could cost him his much-needed job. Kunle ushered Dayo into a quiet, cold waiting area. "Listen, Dayo, my king," he whispered, kneeling down. "You must be silent. You must not move. If the chief sees you, we are ruined. Do you understand?" Dayo nodded, holding tight to his precious broken egungun mask, the single link to his late grandfather who had passed on his wisdom and stories. But Kunle was urgently called away to fetch an important document from the basement, safe for the chief. Kunle begged Dayo again, "Stay put, son," and rushed off. Dayo waited. The waiting room was cold, his clothes were damp. He got bored and decided to explore the quiet hallway. He saw a huge, imposing door slightly ajar. It led to the chief's main office. He pushed the door open, just a little, and peeked in. He saw the chief, slumped in his chair, seemingly in a deep sleep. "The test begins." Dayo walked into the enormous office. It smelled expensive, like old leather and polished wood, but also cold. The chief looked like a tired statue. Dayo slowly walked over to the corner of the room, far from the chief. He sat down and pulled his knees to his chest, placing the broken mask carefully on the floor beside him. He was waiting for his father. Tick, tock. The fancy clock on the wall seemed to mock his boredom. 5 minutes later, Dayo felt a shiver run down his spine. The office was too cold. He looked at the chief again. The old man, who was only wearing a thin, traditional white buba shirt, seemed to be trembling slightly. His lips looked pale. Dayo forgot all about the fear of being seen. He forgot about the millions of naira spilling out of the briefcase next to the chief's hand. He only saw a cold old man who might be sick. The chief was running his test perfectly. He was waiting for the sound of paper, the sound of the money being snatched. But instead, Dayo stood up and walked over. The small boy didn't grab the cash. He didn't even touch the briefcase. He only reached out his hand and gently touched the chief's forearm. It was ice cold. "Sir," Dayo whispered, "you are shivering. It is too cold to sleep like this." The chief, pretending to be deep asleep, felt his cynical heart lurch. The boy wasn't a thief. He was a nurse. Dayo looked around the luxurious office for a blanket. He couldn't see one. His damp clothes were useless. He looked at his own thin t-shirt. He couldn't take it off. It wouldn't help. Then his eyes fell on the only thing he owned that held warmth, not the warmth of fire, but the warmth of a loving story. The broken Igungun mask. His grandfather had always told him, "This mask holds the sun of our village inside, my child. It will protect you from all cold and bad spirits." Dayo walked back to his corner, picked up the broken wooden carving, and returned to the chief's chair. His eyes were determined. He couldn't give the chief the money, but he could give him the spiritual warmth of his family. He stood beside the chief. He reached out and carefully placed the smooth, cool wood of the Igungun mask over the chief's exposed hand, covering his pale fingers. The moment the wooden mask touched the chief's skin, the Chief Durosomo's eyes, still tightly shut, snapped open inside his head. This was more than kindness. This was a sacrifice that spoke louder than any sermon. He felt a sudden, sharp, terrible heat in his chest, as if the cold ice around his heart was finally cracking. The chief was overwhelmed. Dayo, seeing the mask placed securely, stepped back. He had paid the chief with his treasure, and now he had warmed him with his heritage. He stood there, waiting to be thanked. But the chief was silent. The chief was not sleeping anymore, but he was not moving. He was staring, with his eyes closed, at the small three-wheeled toy car his own son had asked him for 10 years ago, which he had refused to buy. The chief's whole body trembled, and he let out a loud, shuddering gasp. Dayo looked at him, terrified. The chief was finally awake, but he was staring right at the briefcase of money, ignoring the mask entirely. He didn't look grateful. He looked furious. "The money!" The chief suddenly roared, his voice shaking the quiet office. "What have you done to my money?" The air in the huge office turned icy cold the moment Chief Durosomo's voice cracked like a whip. "The money!" He shouted again, pointing a shaking finger at the open briefcase. "What have you done to my money?" Dayo froze. His small legs felt like jelly. He looked from the chief's angry red face to the briefcase. The money was still there, all the stacks were neat and untouched, exactly where the chief had left them. Dayo didn't even know why the chief was shouting. "Sir," Dayo stammered, stepping back a little. "I didn't touch it, I only—" Suddenly, the heavy door burst open. Kunle, Dayo's father, rushed in, holding the documents he was sent to fetch. He stopped dead. He saw the chief, awake and towering over the boy. He saw the overflowing briefcase. And worst of all, he saw the small, broken Igungun mask lying right next to the chief's pale hand. Kunle's face went white. He knew immediately what the chief must think. Dayo was caught right next to millions of cash, with his hands near the boss, and the chief was shouting about the money. "Dayo, my God, Dayo!" Kunle dropped the papers. He ran across the room and grabbed his son, pulling him tight behind his back like a shield. He turned to the chief, bowing low, his body shaking harder than the rain outside. "Chief, sir, I am so sorry. I should never have brought him here. Please, sir. I promise you, we did not touch a single naira. My son is not a thief, I can be trusted." The Chief Durosomo watched them. This was the second part of his cruel test. He wanted to see if Kunle would defend his own child, or try to save his job by blaming Dayo. He wanted to see the family break. "You promise?" The chief growled, sounding very dangerous. "Then tell me, Kunle, why is this thing on my desk?" He picked up the broken wooden mask with 2 fingers, holding it up like it was something dirty and smelly. "And why was your small boy standing right over me, whispering and disturbing my rest?" Kunle looked at the mask, then at Dayo's wide, terrified eyes peeking from behind his leg. He knew that mask was Dayo's most cherished possession. He couldn't understand why his son had placed it there. "Sir," Kunle said, his voice thick with shame, "my son must have been trying to play a game. Children are foolish. Please, punish me. I will work for free for a month to pay for this mistake. Just please, don't be angry at my son." The chief stared at the father. Kunle was offering to lose his entire paycheck to protect his child. This was not the reaction the chief expected. The chief had hoped to see anger directed at the boy for risking their future. "Work for free," the chief snorted, letting the mask drop with a soft thud back onto the desk. "That is not enough, Kunle. You have caused me great trouble. I was in the middle of a very important calculation. Now, something is missing. The twist, the missing item." Kunle swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the briefcase. Something is missing. If they hadn't touched the money, what could it be? The chief slowly reached into the pocket of his expensive white shirt and pulled out a small, fancy pocket watch. It was gold and shone brightly, but the glass covering the face was smashed into tiny pieces. "This is my father's watch," the chief said, his voice now low and shaky, full of fake sadness. "It is worth much more than the money in that briefcase. I always keep it right here, on this small side table, right next to the fire. But when I woke up, it was on the floor. And now look." He showed them the shattered glass. "It is ruined. This watch is priceless." "Who broke it?" Dayo took a hesitant step forward, forgetting his fear for a moment. "Sir," he said quickly, "I saw the watch. When I came in, the briefcase was near the edge, and the watch was already on the floor. It had fallen off the table." The chief slammed his cane on the marble floor. Bang! "Lies!" the chief shouted. "Are you calling me a liar, boy? This watch has been here for 50 years. Only a careless, clumsy child could have knocked it down. It will cost a fortune to fix this." He pointed a sharp finger at Dayo. "It was you, wasn't it? You came in here, touched things you shouldn't, and broke what belongs to me." Kunle quickly pulled Dayo back. "He is sorry, sir, please. He is just a child, he does not know better. We will pay for it. I will sell everything I own. I will sell my mother's jewelry. I will work for a year for free. Just tell me how much it costs." "It costs 500,000 naira to fix." The chief lied easily. That was more than Kunle earned in 6 months. "And I want it now. I want payment for your son's carelessness right now." Tears sprang into Kunle's eyes. 500,000 naira? It was impossible. He knew he was trapped. He looked at his son, then at his boss, and felt a wave of complete failure wash over him. The test of the heart. Dayo watched his father's shoulders slump. He saw the sadness and the fear in his father's face. He knew that much money was impossible for them. His father would have to work for months and months without bringing home food, and his mother was already sick. Dayo looked at the broken watch, then at his own hand. The chief had dropped the mask earlier, and Dayo had quietly picked it up and hidden it in his damp pocket. Dayo knew his father was already offering everything. Dayo had already given his most precious thing, the mask, to fix the chief's coldness. But the chief was still angry. He was still shouting. Dayo stepped out from behind his father, standing tall even though his knees were shaking. He pulled the broken Egungun mask out of his pocket and held it out to the chief again. "Sir," Dayo said, his voice clear and brave, like a tiny bell ringing in the big room. "My father cannot pay 500,000. He doesn't have it. But I told you, this mask is the most valuable thing in my world. My grandfather gave it to me. He said it has the strength of a leopard inside." Dayo walked right up to the chief. He placed the broken mask gently on the table, right next to the chief's smashed watch. "Take it, sir," Dayo insisted. "Take the mask. It is full of goodness. Maybe the goodness can fix the watch. Please take it, and don't be angry at my daddy anymore." Kunle gasped. "Dayo, no, not the mask." The Chief Durosomo stared at the boy. His breath caught in his throat. He had expected the mother to yell at the boy. He had expected the father to scream at the child for costing them a fortune. He expected to see panic, anger, and betrayal, the greed he saw everywhere. Instead, the son was offering his last, most sacred possession, the only link to his family's past, to save his father's peace. He was giving his soul to pay a fake debt. The chief looked at the shining gold watch with the shattered face. Then he looked at the broken wooden mask with the single cowrie shell eye. The mask was worthless in money, but it was priceless in love. A strange, painful heat spread through the chief's chest. For the first time in many years, Chief Durosomo felt a terrible shame. He had millions of cash, just inches away, but the boy had shown him a treasure 1,000 times more valuable. The chief's hand, still shaking, reached not for the money, but for the broken mask. He held it, feeling the rough, cool wood. He looked at Dayo, his eyes wet, though he quickly blinked the moisture away. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words were stuck. He couldn't go through with the angry lie anymore. He saw the bravery and the pure love in the boy's eyes. You would give me this?" the chief whispered, his voice losing its roar and becoming a dry, scratchy sound. "Yes, sir," Dayo said simply. "Is it enough?" The chief looked down at the mask, and then at the 500,000 naira he had demanded. "It is more than enough," the Chief Durosomo finally whispered. He put the broken Egungun mask carefully back on the table. He looked at Kunle, who was still trembling, ready to beg. Then he looked at Dayo, standing firm and brave. "Kunle," the chief said, his voice suddenly strong and cold again, but now with a strange hardness that felt more real than the fake anger. "Take the boy and leave this office. Now." Kunle quickly pulled Dayo to the door. "Thank you, sir, thank you," he repeated, backing out. "But wait," the chief commanded, raising his voice one last time. Kunle froze, thinking the chief was changing his mind, ready to fire him after all. The chief looked directly at Dayo, his eyes sharp and serious. He pointed not at the door, but at the open briefcase full of money. "Boy, you have seen things you should not see today. You have heard secrets. If you ever tell anyone what you saw in this room, or what you gave me to fix the watch," the chief leaned forward, his eyes burning into Dayo's small face, "I will ruin your life and your father's life. Do you understand? Go." Kunle grabbed Dayo's hand and almost dragged him out of the huge office. He didn't say a word until they were standing by the car outside, watching the rain still fall heavily. Kunle was shaking his head, his face full of worry. "Dayo, my king, what were you thinking? You gave him the mask, the one thing grandfather gave us. And what did he mean by that threat?" Dayo looked back at the tall, dark building. "Daddy, he was just cold. I tried to help, and he was angry about the watch. He wanted money, but I gave him the best thing I had." Dayo's heart felt heavy, not because of the threat, but because the chief hadn't even said thank you. "The chief is not a man to argue with," Kunle whispered, buckling Dayo into the car. "We must forget everything we saw here. The money, the mask, the watch, everything. If he ruins us, what will happen to your mother?" The journey back to the mansion was long and quiet. Dayo kept thinking about the chief's strange words. I will ruin your life if you tell anyone what you saw. It felt like a heavy stone sitting in his small tummy. The new routine. The cold silence. For the next 3 days, life at the mansion was colder than usual. Kunle worked his shifts, driving the chief silently through Lagos. The chief didn't speak to Kunle at all. He just sat in the back, staring out the window, looking even gloomier than before. Kunle was terrified. He was sure the chief was just waiting for the right moment to fire him. He knew they were poor, and losing this job meant losing everything. Dayo kept waiting to hear his father say, "Pack your bags, we are leaving." He missed his broken Igungun mask terribly. It felt like a piece of his family was missing. On the 4th day, Kunle was driving the chief to a very fancy club on the island. The chief was sitting in the back, not moving. As they stopped at a traffic light, the chief suddenly spoke, his voice dry and scratchy. "Kunle." "Sir?" Kunle jumped. "I will not be eating at the club tonight. I want you to drive me home. I want you to ask your wife to prepare a simple dinner. Fried yam and stew. Nothing fancy. Just food like ordinary people eat." Kunle was completely shocked. The chief never ate at home. He never ate simple Nigerian food, and he certainly never spoke to Kunle's wife. "Sir, are you sure?" "My wife, she is just a simple cook, sir." "I am sure," the chief snapped. "And bring the boy. He will eat with us." The suspense. A dinner invitation. Kunle drove home with his heart racing. He rushed into their small, neat house on the compound grounds. "Wife, Dayo, get ready. The chief is coming for dinner. He wants fried yam and stew, and Dayo, you must sit with us." Dayo's mother, Mama Dayo, was a gentle woman. She was scared. "The chief? In our small home? Why? Is he coming to fire you in person, Kunle?" "I don't know," Kunle admitted, pacing the floor. "But we must be perfect. Dayo, remember to be silent. Do not speak unless spoken to." Mama Dayo quickly cooked the best yam and stew she could make. The aroma of spices and fresh tomatoes filled their small home. When the chief arrived, he did not look like the rich man from the office. He looked tired and old. He walked into their small living room and sat down on their simple sofa. It was silent for a very long time. Finally, Kunle asked, "Sir, please, the food is ready. Shall we eat?" They sat at the small dining table. The chief sat opposite Dayo. The dinner was the most uncomfortable meal of their lives. Kunle and Mama Dayo didn't dare speak. Dayo ate slowly, keeping his eyes on his plate. The chief ate slowly too. He finished his food and pushed his plate back. "Your wife is a good cook, Kunle," the chief said. This was the first kind thing he had said in days. "Thank you." "Sir," Mama Dayo whispered, relieved. Then the chief turned his attention to Dayo. "Boy," the chief said. Dayo looked up, scared. "Why did you try to give me that ugly wooden mask the other day?" Dayo answered honestly. "Because you were shaking, sir. And my grandfather said the mask has the spirit of the leopard. The leopard is brave and warm. I thought the mask would give you courage and stop the cold." The chief looked at Dayo for a long moment. He didn't sneer. He didn't shout. "You think I am cold, boy?" "Yes, sir," Dayo said softly. "Cold people are sad people." The chief looked away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the smashed gold watch. He placed it on the table. "This watch belonged to my father. 50 years ago, I gave him a similar gift to yours. I was 9 years old, just like you. He was traveling, and I was scared he would forget me. So I gave him my favorite drawing. He put it in his own pocket watch, right behind the face, so he could see it every day." The chief's voice was now soft and full of memory. "But when I was greedy and chased after money, I broke this watch and I lost the drawing. I haven't seen that drawing for 20 years. He looked straight at Dayo. "I need that drawing. It is the real treasure that is missing, not the money. The money is just paper. But the drawing is my childhood. The twist. The search." The chief stood up abruptly. "I need that drawing back. Kunle, Dayo, come with me." He walked out of the small house and back towards the large, silent mansion. Kunle and Dayo followed him, confused and scared. The chief led them straight back to his huge office. He walked over to the desk where the briefcase had been. He pointed to a small wooden chest on the corner of the table. "This box holds all my father's important papers. When my own son and daughters found out I was sick, they came here searching. They didn't find the drawing, but they took something else that was important to me, something they didn't want me to have. He looked at Kunle, his eyes serious. I believe they took the key to my father's hidden safe. I need the safe opened. It contains things they want to hide. The chief sighed, looking truly defeated. But I cannot remember the safe code. My mind is getting weak. I only remember two things, a secret phrase and a very old photograph. The photograph is inside this drawer. I want you to find it. Now. Kunle and Dayo searched the drawer. It was full of old pens, notebooks, and dusty papers. After a few minutes, Kunle pulled out a faded black and white photograph. It was a picture of a little boy, maybe 9 years old, sitting next to a big, serious man. The boy looked exactly like a younger Chief Durosomo. This is it, sir, your photograph, Kunle said, handing it to the chief. The chief's eyes lit up for a moment. Then the light disappeared. He stared at the photograph for a long time. Yes, the chief whispered. This is me and my father. This is how I remember kindness. He looked around the room, then pointed to the photograph Dayo was still holding. The secret phrase is written on the back of the photograph. It is the key to the safe. Read it, Dayo. Dayo turned the picture over. Written in faded handwriting were 5 short, powerful words. He took a deep breath and read them out loud. Kindness is stronger than gold. The chief smiled, a real smile this time, but it was sad. Yes, he said, that is the phrase. Now, put the photograph inside that safe. He pointed to a small metal door hidden behind a large bookshelf. Kunle pulled the shelf aside. The metal safe was dark and strong. Kunle tried to open it, using the phrase as the code, but it remained locked. The key is missing, Kunle realized. Sir, you said your children took the key. We cannot open it without the key. The chief's face darkened again. He looked at Dayo and Kunle with a strange mix of fear and desperation. You must find that key, the chief ordered, his voice suddenly sharp. It is a small silver key with a leopard carved on the top. It is the only thing that will save this family, and I know exactly where they hid it. They hid it in the place where I keep the only good memory of my life. Go now, go and find the key before they know you are looking. Dayo and Kunle stared at the chief. His face was no longer mean or grumpy, it was worried and pleading. He looked like an old, sick man who was truly scared. Sir, Kunle stammered, pointing at the massive office. You have 100 places here. Where do you keep the only good memory of your life? The chief let out a shaky sigh. My children know where. It is the only room they hate visiting. It is the place where I keep the mask you gave me, Dayo. Dayo gasped. The Egon gun mask? Yes, the chief whispered. I didn't throw it away. After you left, I went to my private art gallery. Everyone knows I love expensive art, but they don't know why I built that special glass case. The chief looked at Dayo with real warmth. It is a small, quiet room next to the library. Inside is a single glass case. I placed your broken wooden mask in there. It is the most honest piece of art I own. He pointed a shaking finger toward the main hall. The key must be hidden in that gallery. My children would never look there because they hate anything that isn't worth millions of cash. Go, find the silver key with the leopard carved on the top. Kunle nodded instantly. This wasn't about a job anymore, it was about helping an old, lonely man. He grabbed Dayo's hand. Let's go, Dayo, quietly. The art gallery search, the false walls. Father and son crept silently through the chief's huge, quiet mansion. It was dark, and the shadows were long and spooky. Kunle led Dayo into the small private gallery. The room was cool and smelled faintly of polish. Right in the middle, under a bright white light, was a tall glass case. And inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was Dayo's broken Egon gun mask. The single cowrie shell eye seemed to be watching them. It looked beautiful and important. Dayo's heart swelled with happiness and sadness. The chief hadn't tossed it away. He valued the kindness. It's beautiful, Daddy, Dayo whispered. We need to focus, son, Kunle whispered back. The key. Where would someone hide a small key in a room with only one glass case? They started searching. Kunle checked under the velvet cushion inside the case. Empty. He checked the frame of the glass case. Nothing. Dayo, being small, noticed something his father missed. The room was not made of stone. The walls were covered in expensive, heavy fabric. Daddy, Dayo whispered, tapping the wall gently. This wall doesn't sound solid here. It sounds hollow. Kunle pressed the wall where Dayo pointed. A small section of the fabric wall, about the size of a book, silently popped open. It was a secret compartment. Inside, they didn't find the key. They found a small, fancy camera that looked very old. A camera? Kunle frowned. Dayo reached in and pulled the camera out. It was heavy. He pressed a button, and the camera flash blinked weakly. Maybe the key is inside. Dayo shook the camera gently. A tiny clink sound came from inside. Kunle quickly opened the camera. Tucked neatly inside the space where the film should go was a small silver key. Engraved clearly on the round top of the key was the fierce, beautiful head of a leopard. We found it, the leopard key. Kunle breathed a huge sigh of relief. The twist, the unexpected visitor. Just as Kunle grabbed the key, a loud, smooth voice cut through the silence of the gallery. Well, well, look what the rain washed in. Dayo and Kunle spun around. Standing in the doorway were two people, the chief's oldest son, Femi, and his daughter, Sade. They were both dressed in fancy, expensive clothes, and their faces looked cold and angry. We were just leaving, sir, Kunle said quickly, hiding the key in his closed fist. Femi stepped closer, smiling a thin, mean smile. No, Kunle, you were just stealing. Daddy told us to check the compound. We never thought you'd be so bold as to look in the one place Daddy treasures. Sade pointed at Dayo. Your little thief of a son gave him that broken mask, didn't he? A pity offering. And now you think you can take something back? We didn't take anything. Dayo cried out, standing up to Sade. Sade laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Oh, really? Then what are you holding, Kunle? Your hand is shaking too much to be empty. Kunle knew they couldn't fight them. They were powerful, rich, and mean. He had to think fast. Chief Durosomo sent me for this, Kunle said, pulling out the small, broken gold pocket watch the chief had shown them. The chief is very ill. He asked me to take his father's watch to the jeweler for repair. It is his dying wish. Femi's smile faded. He looked at the shattered watch. He didn't seem sad, he just seemed annoyed. That old junk, you risked your job for that? You are a fool, Kunle. Sade looked suspicious. She stepped toward the glass case. She opened the small door next to the case and pulled out a small electronic device. It was a listening and recording machine. We knew he was going soft, Sade hissed. Daddy has been whispering secrets lately. We set a small trap. We know he put a microphone in here to catch us plotting, but we were listening to him instead. She pressed a button on the device. A recording started playing in the quiet room. It was the chief's voice, scratchy and low. I cannot remember the safe code. My mind is getting weak. I only remember two things, a secret phrase and a very old photograph. The photograph is inside this drawer. I want you to find it. Now. Femi and Sade looked at each other, their eyes wide with panic. They had not realized the chief had a hidden safe, and they had just heard the phrase, kindness is stronger than gold. Sade quickly pressed another button, and the recording stopped. He has a safe, and they know the key. They heard the phrase, she shouted at her brother. Femi looked from the small key in Kunle's hand to the furious Sade. He knew the money, the real, hidden billions, was locked in that safe. Give me the key, driver, Femi roared, lunging at Kunle. Kunle quickly put Dayo behind him and dodged Femi. He ran out of the gallery and back down the long, spooky hallway toward the chief's office. The ultimate trap, the locked door. Kunle ran faster than he ever had, Dayo holding tight to his shirt. They reached the chief's office door and burst in, breathless. The chief was sitting exactly where they left him, but he looked worse. He looked pale and very weak. The key, sir, we found the key, Kunle yelled, holding up the silver key with the leopard head. The chief's eyes lit up with relief. Quick, the safe, open it now, before they get here. Kunle rushed to the bookshelf, pulled it back, and put the key into the safe's lock. He turned it. Click. The safe door opened smoothly, but just as the safe opened, the main office door slammed shut with a sickening boom. Femi and Sade were standing right behind the door. Femi had a terrible, mean look on his face. He had run around the long way and cut them off. Sade was holding a remote control. She smiled a cruel, cold smile. Too late, driver, Sade said, her voice dripping with triumph. The safe is open, but you are not leaving. We locked the room. And now you will open the safe for us. Or else. The chief's office was suddenly silent, except for the heavy sound of breathing. The main door was locked tight. Kunle and Dayo were trapped. Femi and Sade stood by the door, blocking the way out. Femi looked strong and angry. Sade held the remote control for the locked door. "Well done, driver," Femi sneered. "You opened the safe for us. Now step away from my father's fortune." Kunle stood frozen in front of the open safe, shielding Dayo. The chief, slumped in his chair, was looking very, very weak. "Children," the chief whispered, his voice thin like paper. "It is not what you think. The fortune is gone." Sade laughed, sharp and cold. "Don't lie, Daddy. We saw the bank statements. Now, Kunle, open the safe and throw the key to Femi. Do it or you lose your job forever." Kunle looked at the chief. The chief nodded sadly, urging him to obey. Kunle reached into the safe, but his hand didn't touch money. The safe was empty, except for a large, dusty, leather-bound book. "It's empty," Kunle gasped. "There's nothing here but a book." Femi and Sade rushed forward to look. Their faces fell. They were staring at an empty metal box. The billions they had searched for were gone. "The money!" Femi screamed, turning back to his father. "Where is it? Old man? Did you move it?" The revelation, the true treasure. The chief smiled, a weak but genuine smile. He looked directly at Dayo, then at Kunle. "The test is over, my children," the chief said, his voice gaining a strange strength. "And you all failed, except for one." He looked at Femi and Sade. "You only searched for money. You didn't search for my health. You didn't search for my love. You only cared about the safe." He reached out a trembling hand and tapped the large leather book inside the safe. "This book is my father's journal. It holds the true treasure, not the cash. The money was moved to a new trust fund months ago when I realized you cared more about my death than my life." He looked at Dayo. "Boy, come here." Dayo, very brave, walked over to the chief. The chief gently put his hand on Dayo's head. "When you thought I was cold, you gave me the mask. When your father thought I was dying, he defended his family. You are the only people who gave me something when I had everything." He looked back at his angry children. "Femi, Sade, did you not hear the safe code? Kindness is stronger than gold. You think gold is the prize, but Dayo taught me the real wealth." Sade was furious. "You're giving everything to this common driver and his boy. We will call the lawyers. We will contest the will." "You can't," the chief said simply. He reached inside the leather book in the safe and pulled out a single, signed legal document. He handed it to Kunle. "Kunle," the chief whispered, "read this. The legacy. The adoption." Kunle took the document. His hands were shaking too hard to hold the paper straight. He looked at the words and gasped. "Sir, this is an adoption agreement," Kunle stammered. "Signed and legally sealed." "Yes," the chief confirmed, looking deeply into Dayo's eyes. "Dayo, my king, you are now officially my adopted son. You are now a Durosomo. Because you gave me back my soul, I am giving you my name." Femi roared and rushed toward the chief, but Kunle stepped forward, holding the document high. "Daddy, you can't do this," Femi shouted. "I can," the chief said, his eyes finally closing, his voice fading to a loving whisper. "The lawyer has all the new instructions. Everything I own, my companies, my homes, my money, it all goes to my new heir. Dayo." He gently handed Dayo a small velvet box. "Open it, son." Dayo opened the box. Inside, resting on soft silk, was his broken Igungun mask. But it was no longer broken. The chief had had the missing piece fixed with a tiny, beautiful piece of gold. "You gave me your most treasured possession," the chief murmured, his breathing slowing down. "I fixed it to remind you. Never let the world break your kind heart. Hold the leopard's strength." Dayo looked at the repaired mask, tears welling up in his eyes. He didn't care about the money or the safe. He cared that the chief finally saw him. Dayo reached out and gently took the chief's hand. He held it for a long, quiet moment. The Chief Durosomo sighed one last time, a long, peaceful breath. He passed away right there in his armchair, a real smile finally on his face. He was no longer the cold, bitter man. Femi and Sade screamed and shouted, but they knew they had lost. They had trusted money, and money had betrayed them. They stormed out of the locked office, vowing revenge, but the will was strong and the adoption was real. Kunle and Mama Dayo cried, not for the money, but for the strange, angry old man who had finally found peace through their son's kindness. Dayo grew up to be a different kind of rich man. He didn't lock himself away in a giant office. He didn't just build skyscrapers. He used his fortune to fix things that were broken, just like he tried to fix the chief's cold heart and the shattered watch. He built schools and hospitals in poor villages. He always kept the gold-fixed Egungun mask on his desk. Whenever someone asked him the secret to his success, he would simply smile and say, "My grandfather taught me that a person's name is worth more than all the gold in the world, and my father proved it by risking his job for my heart. I bought my fortune with kindness, not with cash."